All right, let's dive into the next lesson. We're going to look at strings and dictionaries. Here the tutorial is here. I've got it fired up already in my Kaggle account. Basically, strings are another type of data where we've talked about integers, we talked about floats. Those are representations of numerical values. Strings are text or basically anything that is not essentially a numerical value to a certain extent. You can create strings either using single or double quotations. Here's an example of two passages. Pluto is a planet that is defined in X and Y, and we'll check and see if X and Y are the same. They are, they're both true. And so as long as you are using either one consistently, you can create a string. Here's a couple examples of strings that were created that have single or double quotations inside the string themselves. So you just have to make sure that if you have a single quotation inside your string, you're using double quotations to make the string. Here you can see Pluto's a planet. My dog is named Pluto, with that type of thing. Here's a situation where you're trying to create a string, but you mess up because you have single quotations inside the string as well as to create the string. You end up with a syntax error. If you change those to double quotations, then you'll be okay. As well as you can use the backslash to tell Python that you don't want that single quotation to be considered an indicator of a string. If we could do it again, and you can see that it works here as well. Using backslash can be used in quite a few different situations. Here's a bunch of examples of using backslash when creating strings. In a previous video, we also used the \n to indicate that you want to put it on a new line. So here we have hello world, and if we create this variable and have this \n in there, it'll actually create hello world on two different lines. Same thing can happen if you use triple quotes. You can put it on different lines as well and create something that's equivalent to using \n. And then in this last code snippet, you've got hello and world. Usually new line is the default, but here we put, instead of new line, we just put a space. You'll notice that hello and world get a new line after them, but if you change a string so that its end is not new line, it will run together. In the earlier videos, we learned about lists, and strings are similar to lists in that they're, instead of a sequence of entities that you're putting together in a list, it's a sequence of characters that are put together into a string. You can do similar things between lists and strings. For example, you can call out a certain character based on its location and in the index of the string. Here for Pluto, index number 0 is going to show you the P value. Here, if you want the third to the last, you can slice it from the third to the last to the end. You're going to end up with Uto, sorry, not net, but Uto. You can ask how long a string is using the len function. It's 5 characters long. And you can loop over a string. So in this case, we've made a for loop using loop representation, condensed loop representation to call out each part of the word Pluto. You should also understand that strings are immutable. You cannot just change individual letters in a string. You'd have to recreate that string and not change the individual assignments inside the string. So here you get an error because you tried to change the first letter to a B. So strings are objects in Python, so they also have methods that you can apply to them. Here you can see some of the examples. The first one is making a string all capital letters. Pluto is a planet has been assigned to this variable. If you execute the .upper method, you're going to get all capitalization. Pluto is a planet, kind of yelling at you, Pluto is a planet. I think you can see that the author of these tutorials really feels strongly about this Pluto thing. You can also make things lowercase. You can search within the string to find where plan exists, the first index of a sub. You can see if there is within the string, if there is a certain word that exists inside the string, and you can see if it starts with or ends with certain strings. With strings, there's also ways you can split and join strings. There are certain methods to do that. Here you can see that Pluto is a string that has spaces in it, and .split will divide that string into the individual words. Pluto is a planet. So it'll convert that string into a list that has the strings inside of it. Something really handy is sometimes you have strings that are dates, and you can actually split that date string into various subparts. So we split the string 1956, January 31st into year, month, and day, and we rejoin them back together using \/ instead of the other format. We can use Unicode characters such as emojis. You can join together, you can insert these clapping hands into the string that we put together before. You're nesting various other methods in here, including .upper. We're using here the for loop that's nested, and we're joining together each of those with clapping hands in between. You can also use the plus sign to concatenate two strings together. So Pluto plus a string that you've defined here, we miss you, ends up with a conjoined string altogether. You can throw in non-string objects, but you have to convert them to a string first. So here you can see position equals 9. So 9 is an integer, and you've tried to add 9 into the string just as an integer, which doesn't work. You basically get an error. You can only concatenate string to a string. So you can convert it to a string, and lo and behold, Pluto, you'll always be the 9th planet to me. So you've converted your integer to a string, so you can actually put it in there. And you can also use the string.format function to create these curly braces that hold basically slots for variables that you can feed into the string. So this is a more advanced way of using strings. You can see planet and position inserts those in the right spots in the resultant string. This is a little cleaner, this is a little more concise way of expressing that. Here you can use other more advanced ways of formatting. Here you have 3 different numbers, and you're actually using .format to insert those numbers in here and actually use the string formatting to determine what type of notation ends up in the string and even how many significant figures are in the resultant string. There's lots of powerful things you can do there. Once again, these are more advanced ways of using strings and using the .format method. In the last part of this lesson, we'll bring up another type of, it's called a data structure. It's similar to lists and tuples. It's called dictionaries. Dictionaries are similar to lists in a way that they are made up of different entities, basically a group of entities. With lists, you have just the entities themselves, but for dictionaries, you actually have a key. So you have 1, 2, and 3 as a string, which is their keys. And then the values for each of those keys are the integers 1, 2, and 3. Basically, what this allows you to do is in a list, you would call out an object using its index. In a list, the first object in a list would have index 0. In a dictionary, you can call different objects or entities or things within a dictionary using the key. Here we're in brackets, we're looking for 1, and we get the 1 number. Something like this, you can actually, with dictionaries, you can also add another value. You don't have to use .append like you do in list. You can create a new entity within that dictionary just by calling or defining that key and then putting the value you want in there. Here you can see the resultant dictionary has 11 in there. And you can also change values. It's a mutable data structure. Python has a lot of dictionary comprehensions with syntax similar to list comprehensions that you saw in the previous tutorial. You have really efficient ways of creating dictionaries using for loops, using like loop comprehensions as well. Once again, more detailed, more advanced things about dictionaries and the methods that go with them. I won't dive into that. You can read through this and learn these more detailed, advanced things if you'd like, but once again, they going a little bit deeper. So once again, at the very end, you can find the link to the exercise where you can go and solidify your understanding of strings and dictionaries.